Hello and welcome to day 99. Gonna party like it's day 99. No, whatever. Day 99, 365 days towards racial change. My name is Tomlin's Nyback. Um, Proud and pleasured to be with you once again. I finally am doing this earlier in the day. One of these days, maybe I'll let you behind the scenes, so to speak, inside the studio, maybe. Oh, it's good to knock this out. No, I love doing this. Uh, it's a challenge to stay on task every day. Da, 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 da. All right, we're here talking about black issues in America and from finances, relationships, politics, geography, past, history, slavery, marginalization, racism, Jim Crow, um, rape, torture, castration, separation of families, America's dysfunction, blacks behaving badly, you name it, it's happening here at some point in this year of taking a look what it means to be black, how to navigate blackness, understanding different institutions for and against blackness. And oh boy, it's a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff. I'll tell you though, let's get into our introduction here. I'm Tomlin's Nyback, and what we got here is a failure to communicate. No, I'm sorry. It's one of my favorite movies, Cool Hand Luke. We're talking about, of course, black issues. We want to reflect and come out. It's not a hate channel or time. I'm not hating any particular persons. I have feelings about certain institutions, to be sure, but there is refraining from hate, even if I get emotional about an issue. But two thoughts are emerged. Here we get into our introduction as I go through this project. First thought has two parts, and that's about psychology, mind, Geist, so to speak. First, for black folks, that are black folks transmitting, transferring, intuiting a slave mentality from the past into the next generation. Levels of ignorance, uh, not being stupid, but I mean not knowing, understanding the system, not interacting properly. You know, are we just conditioned to be oppressed, and is that being passed down? Or are we conditioned and mentally in our mind? Are so susceptible to the environment, uh, um, squeezing us into its mold? Are we still slaves, so to speak, in the system? And is that something we are just passing on from generation to generation? The second thought of that second vein of the first thought is very similar. Does the white psychology, does the white mind go from generation to generation? Or are they transferring entitlement, privilege, expectation of favor into their siblings and communicating to one another on that nature? And the second thought that's emerging is a burden for financial literacy, understanding, banking system, what happens to our dollars, our dollars why we got to buy so much Chinese products, lamps, clothing, hair care. You look on the label and you'll see these things are made in China, Malaysia. I work for a logistics company, and so I see so much of America's probably disposable income is spent on Chinese product. I had no idea how pervasive that nation's presence was on our soil. This machine's probably made in China. Musical instruments, everything. Uh, Essential oil diffuser. If I turn it over, it's probably made in China. China. It's a couple months ago, last year. China landed on the dark side of the moon. I haven't heard much about that. So now when we turn the moon over, it's going to say made in China. You know what I mean? Uh, and I don't think they don't care about that. We need a national boycott. There's ways to, there's boycotts and stuff to do that, but people are just too wrapped up. So what I'm coming back to is blacks need to understand financially what that means, because in supporting the Chinese economy, we're actually hurting ourselves, because Asians, as an institution, are antagonistic towards black folks, and even more so in business. You know, they don't do business with black folks. They do business with their own kind, and they're very um, clear about that. So black folks we need financial literacy. We need to have more business mind and more entrepreneurial minds, more understanding um, business structures, tax codes. We need the financial literacy and language. We're living in an expectation of working for someone and being treated well, retiring well, and all that. We need to understand that employees pay incredible amounts of taxes, and they do so for a reason. Corporations and businesses have different tax structures, and they pay less for a reason. We need to know why that is. Okay, that's some of the thoughts that come out. Uh, what got me started on this road was a man named a friend of mine introduced me to Dr. Claude Anderson's phenomenal work on the subject of blackness, uh, where civil rights and social integration are positioned in our life and history, what it means, its impotency, its effectiveness, things like that, and beyond. Jim Crow, slavery history, institutions, all that. He's very articulate, and it was a godsend to me, because I didn't know how to articulate my issues here in America. I read 3 of his works. I want you to get these books. First book was A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. Second book was Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice, and Powernomics, his national plan to empower Black America. I'll let you know, you look at the copyright, and those texts may be dated somewhat at this point. They're over 10 years old, but it's a timeless subject. Slavery, marginalization of black folks, black struggle, black dysfunction, blacks bearing the dysfunction, the majority of the dysfunction of the nation goes back hundreds of years, so there's plenty of material from which to draw. It's going to be hard to exhaust that subject. And just so we're not down in the dumps, humdrum, black folks here, we take a fictional look at black slavery life. In mid-1800s America, Harriet Beecher Stowe's phenomenal work, Uncle Tom's Cabin. I reference that work because it informs theater, stereotypes. A lot of things come from her book. When that book came out, when it was compiled, it was originally a series of short stories in an abolitionist newspaper. As it got consolidated into one text, and when it came out, it was the second bestseller after the Bible. So it was in a lot of homes, and it influenced a lot of lives. We get blackface from that book, which is a controversial expression nowadays. What used to be the main, um, a staple of theater to depict black people, white people putting on black pigment. And also, black folks put on black pigment too. So we'll talk about that. We'll get to that eventually. Behind me, you see hashtag us too. It's kind of a response to the hashtag Me Too movement. Hashtag Me Too movement. There's white women being expressive about being uncomfortable with a lot of sexual approaches and women's issues, but black women felt they needed a response to that same issues essentially, but you'll find them there. Another site's kind of a black Facebook, is Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, and dot whatever, I forget that it's a different designator on the end of that. And you'll find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com. That's where I got that book. She's got bundles. And Heritage Institute in Washington, D.C., little headquarters over there. It's a physical space, I think, last I heard he was reaching for. Oh, if you have an entrepreneurial mind, theblackbusinessschool.com. Go find Dr. Boyce Watkins. He's actually good friends with Dr. Claude Anderson. So if you go there, tell Dr. Watkins that Tomlin's Nyback sent you. He doesn't know me from Adam, but just let him know somebody's talking good stuff about him. He let me do some trials and stuff. I'm not a subscription guy, but apparently a lot of people are. It's a good marketing thing and all that. Just kind of, I've always been a misfit, outlier, strange dude. So no subscriptions. I'm glad I'm getting to you today. Today is this bar guy, some attorney general, higher up, is about to testify on Capitol Hill about some issues, but the main thing is the president's taxes. So we're going to, we got a few minutes left. Everything lines up. The stars align today, so we can get this out the way, and it's good. And I want you all, see, my life, I am the blue-collar worker, but I was the blue-collar worker that didn't have access to information. Thank God for the information age. But because I work nights and my life's configured in a different way, so now in the daytime, I get to see these guys are making government long-term decisions that influence millions of lives. The world hangs on what these men and women are doing, and it's amazing. This is not new by any means. This has always been going on since the government has been created. It's almost 24/7 as these hearings and these talks and committees and all these things going on, and I have little say. Even I'm not much of a voter, but even if I was a voter, that would be my vote really wouldn't carry too much weight. But I would want to chime in. I would want to have to exercise some power, or find out. These guys have so much top secret stuff. They're paying for it with my money. They're telling me that I don't have the right to hear what they're doing with my money. It's amazing what us Americans, we just trust the government. All right, we're going to continue on. That's going to maybe be another subject for another day in this year. We got a lot to cover. But we're going through a series right now. We're having these mock interviews with the signers of the Declaration of Independence. 56 signers. We do 2 a day, so it's going to be about 28 entries We're just blowing right through. We're getting the information from Wikipedia, so it's not any in-depth study by any means. But we're filling in the gaps. We want to know how they felt about slavery, what motivated them to sign the Declaration of Independence, what was going on in their lives. So far, we get a lot of merchants, and we have lawyers, physicians, religious guys. You know, no blue collar guys were there. You know, these guys are business owners. They are running things, so running the government just comes natural to them. You know, but little Joe Schmo, you know, and so far, you know, we don't have too much overt. How can you say? We don't have a whole lot of overt advocacy for slaves. We got one confirmed abolitionist so far. Let's see if we can dig out some more. We're going to come close today with the two guys we got coming up. We got today John Hancock and Benjamin Harrison, day 99. John Hancock, he's born 1737, died 1793. He was wealthy all his life. You know, his signature even looks like a kind of a stamp. Interesting signature. It's very blocked out. He wrote that naturally. You know, it's not a wavy thing. It's very aligned and adjusted. Very famous signature. Anyway, he was wealthy. He was groomed for the family business and all that. But right before, there was a lot of struggle. There were a lot of struggles going on. You know, the land and the people on the land didn't yield. It wasn't always peaceful and peaceable on the land. Violence has seemed to just become a permanent part of the American tapestry, and that's not going away anytime soon. Maybe even the whole Western Hemisphere. But the French and Indian War came along sometime before the American Revolution, but from John Hancock's business, he profited from the French and Indian War, probably from supplies and trading, being a broker of arms and things like that. He eventually left. Well, he did go overseas to England to advance his business. We find him as a Congregationalist. The Congregationalists, they have the autonomy of the congregation, little Protestant religion with Christ and choosing free will and like that, but the organizational structure of the government was autonomy from all the other congregations. He had a slave early on. I bet you he was probably close to the slave. We find in stories and whatnot that because the slave to the younger white people was the caregiver a lot of ways, and a lot of times, so that the younger white child attached themselves often to the older black slaves. Then it mentions 2 or 3 slaves, after John Hancock kind of took over the business and whatnot. 2 or 3 slaves are mentioned, not by name, but to show the family's attitude towards slavery. They had integrity, and this is happening up north, and John's uncle, Uncle Thomas, not the Uncle Tom we're going to talk about in a couple days, but he had Uncle Thomas that had the same business. It was a big family business. But the two or three slaves mentioned for integrity's sake are mentioned because he's in Uncle Thomas's will. He specified he wanted those two or three slaves freed upon his death, and the family honored that, emancipated them. Maybe it was kind of a manumission. Manumission is when the slave does something to enrich the white owner's life or informs uh, the authorities that the slaves are organizing to revolt or escape. But we don't know. I didn't find the reason that his Uncle Thomas was so adamant about freeing these slaves at his death. They were just probably, they probably were just good slaves, and it wasn't like the South where you just drive the poor slave into the ground to death. You have a sense of humanity. You already, forced them their labor with no pay. They were probably treated well up north, but it was a burden to do right by them. This Uncle Thomas. Oh, now John Hancock signed. The British had just got done. It was called the 6 or 7 year War, and their money was tight. It was apparently expensive, and with the colony, their little colony franchise was working very well. The whole system of slavery and goods and all that circling the Atlantic Ocean was just too enticing. So you find Britain with the overreach of their taxes. They got the Stamp Act, Sugar Acts, Molasses Acts, Tea Acts, and whatnot. All these new revenue streams that they just whipped up on a whim and made it happen. So John Hancock, being a businessman, saw the handwriting on the wall. He saw England making a business decision. Now remember, excuse me, the white men that signed this declaration, I find a lot of the motivation is economics and the encroachment of England on their wallets, on their businesses, plantations, and whatnot. So they wanted to get away from that. But remember, once they severed those ties, then they turned around and conveniently oppressed black folks. And they did it on steroids. uh, John Hancock's decision to support and assist the colonies had just had an economic flavor to it, and he didn't advocate. The handful of slaves mentioned in his narrative uh, were really unique to him, and you don't find him voicing a lot of dissent to his Southern brothers to do better by the slaves. Next signer up is Benjamin Harrison, born 1726, died 1791. Now he had a large family with many plantations and slaves, and what what he had. That's interesting. In the Wikipedia, in the narrative, he was Benjamin the Fifth, and his family really loved that name. So there are a lot of Benjamins, and even when he came around, Benjamin Harrison the Fifth, he was part of a large family. So he was a slave owner, a lot of plantations and whatnot. Now we found this is the first person mentioned as having no religion. There was a couple guys in that undeclared category. So we took the interview in the vein of kind of like atheist, but since it just says no religion, um, we didn't even put him in that category. You know, this guy was just busy, busy with his slaves and the plantation and large family and whatnot. And this didn't impact uh, his slave life, um, his relationship with the slaves, uh, for or against. You know, it's just the slave institution. He was a part of it, and he just ran with it. Um, his he was just motivated to participate in signing the Declaration of Independence. His reasons economical, since he was a merchant and he had crops and he wanted to retain more. You know, you become rich. One aspect of becoming rich is how much money you retain. And again, he saw Britain, Great Britain, reaching out from all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, and he had no representation. He just was more taxed and taxed and taxed. So he had to align himself with the patriots in the colonies and resist those loyal to the crown. So there's two more guys out the way. John Hancock, Benjamin Harrison. Do your own research, due diligence. See if you can come up with any unique facts or tales about them in relation to their motivations for signing the Declaration of Independence, religious affiliations, and if their relationship with God or not impacted their view on slavery and relationship with slaves. I'm Thomas Nyback. That's 365 days towards racial change. Day 99 out of the way. Let's see if we can make that 100 tomorrow. I might lose sleep thinking about that. So join us again. I'll see you soon.